So apparently Geshe didn't hear me when I gave him the 10-minute warning as I usually do. So he'll be down in 2 or 3 minutes. He told me to talk to folks. So does anybody have any questions about the upcoming program or anything like that?
I can put a link into the chat about the FPMT, the link to the FPMT information about the basic program.
Okay, cool. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, he's here. All right, we'll get started. Okay. Yeah, chilas. So hopefully everybody can hear both of us. And just for sound quality, if you're not muted, just mute yourself for the class. But then, of course, we'll have Q&A at the end.
It is a little soft, I would say.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. Your mics could be closer at this point.
Yeah. I moved it last time because Geshe was like, it's too close to my face. I'm worried also it will topple the stand, but let's see what happens.
Hello.
Is that better?
A little bit.
You can just have to get right up here and see what happens.
That's better.
Doesn't like that, but
No. Yeah, it's better. It's better.
Was there any problem with mine, or was it okay?
Yeah, you could bring yours closer too.
All right. How's that?
It's better. It's a little bit better. Yeah.
He doesn't like Geshe doesn't like it.
No.
I'm gonna see if I can.
Okay. It's not bad.
He doesn't like it. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, Geshe, you have to talk louder. It's He's worried it's going to topple over, and he has good reason to, because it's weighted on the stand in a way that it does topple over, so that's happened before.
As long as you have one of the feet pointed in the same direction, it should be okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
You have to realize Geshe's voice is soft.
That's good. That's really good. That's really good.
Okay. Oops. Now my mic stand is falling over. Hold on a sec. Okay. Listen. So first of all, greetings Tashitele to all of the Dharma friends. Geshe hopes that you're all well, and he hopes that you're all happy. So all of us generally, we are within the abodes of samsara, but as we engage in this activity, it is really important to have this idea that we are feeling very happy. Sorry, I just got a notification someone didn't mute themselves, so if everyone can... Okay. All right, thank you. Okay. So, of course, generally we understand that samsaric happiness, that the happiness of cyclic existence is not something that is stable. But what we do is we place our hopes that based upon achieving decent conditions within samsara, on that based upon those moments of samsaric happiness, that we can use that as a springboard to work towards that ultimate happiness. And right now, in fact, we have the basis for being able to work towards that happiness. The Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, they have instructed us, all of the holy beings, that we have that foundation for, with this human rebirth, achieving that ultimate happiness in the very palm of our hands. And when we think about the various objects of refuge, about Buddha Shakyamuni, also about Tara, Avalokiteshvara, and so forth, it is the same way, right? Starting out as ordinary, working with those momentary happinesses towards ultimate happiness, that they achieved enlightenment.
And in
terms of the merits that they accumulate to reach that state of Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, complete and perfect enlightenment, we know that in the text it talks about like 3 incalculable eons of merit. So that is in fact quite a lot of merit. I see a lot of notifications popping up. Is the sound still okay? It is.
Kedrup, you're a little bit quiet.
I literally don't know what to do at this point. Okay,
Sound is good here.
Do you guys want me to get up again and adjust things, or is that more distracting than me just continuing? It's whatever folks want me to do.
Can the folks not turn up their own volume?
Oh, I guess they could do that. But
Well,
I think some people are listening on different devices. So shall I try to adjust?
Yeah, just turn up the sound a bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a feeling I'm going to speak and then people are going to be like, it's too loud. How's that?
You can back up a little bit. Yeah. There we go. That's good. That's good.
Okay, just so that people know, I didn't adjust it 1 iota from yesterday. Like, my setup remained the same on the desk, so I'm not sure why that happens. I do try to keep it the same, but anyways, hopefully that's better.
This way.
It's good.
It is? Okay, so shall we continue?
Yes, please.
Okay, all right. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, it's up to you guys, you know, like, do let me know, like, if you really can't hear, let me know, and I'll get up and adjust, but I'm also mindful that, like, some folks have told me when you get up and adjust, that's distracting, so I try to balance both sides of what people want. My apologies. Oh.
On this was what that the Ina, Tashiva Tomba Suina, Kachi Trumas and Yutsu, Cyril, Boba Cherandroya, Gawa Cherandroya, Wenetsi, Royaris.
So some people feel discouraged when they hear that in order for those beings to achieve complete Buddhahood or full enlightenment, that they need to accumulate these 3 incalculable eons of merits. But other people hear that, and in fact, this is something that is very encouraging to them. And also, to give it a little bit of perspective, right, hearing 3 incalculable eons to accumulate merit, that sounds like a lot. But when you think of our countless lifetimes within samsara, we've actually wasted many eons without cultivating. And it is also said, right, through various practices, that the accumulation of the equivalent of many eons of merits can be very efficient. So, for example, in a story of Shakyamuni Buddha, it is said that within 1 week, through a particular cultivation, he was able to accumulate 90 eons of merits. Yeah, so these are all, just related to that. So what do we need? We need not just this temporary happiness, right? But we want to also be able to achieve that perfect, lasting happiness. Loso. Yeah, yeah.
야 저마케가 따도 롱보체 도더니 도도더니 따도 롱보체 더니 저거 왔어. 저마존을 저마치 저거 알아왔어.
Yeah.
된 노지 징한조. 마리파도 내 저도 컨트롤 지가 노와 저마치가 아주 콜코디 알아요.
So part of what keeps us from achieving these merits, and in fact part of what keeps us cycling within samsara, is these illusion-like views of phenomena. So through the lens of attachment, through the lens of anger, through the lens of ignorance, we are perceiving many kind of illusions, things that are not in accord with reality. And this is part of what keeps us circling within samsara. And also, the ultimate nature of that we call the body, that we call my mind. Because of those veils of afflictions, we are not able to fully see or understand that. In fact, we could say that these veils of illusions, they're a little bit like clouds in the sky that are sometimes blocking the light of the sun that would allow us to see clearly. But if we can part those clouds of delusion from the sun that bestows clarity, on that basis we will be able to perceive the way things really are and work towards that real, that lasting ultimate happiness. And so when we speak about relative truth, relative truths are said to be that which block the way things really are. So in this analogy, then, those relative truths, they can actually block us from seeing how things really are. And it is for that reason that it is important for us to study and to practice to be able to understand both relative and ultimate truth. And we also understand that every phenomena has these two facets, right? It has the facet of relative truth, and it also has the facet of ultimate truth. So as we proceed in our practice, part of what we are aiming towards is to be able to perceive those two truths, relative and ultimate, for all phenomena. So then let us place our body and our mind in a state of relaxation. So put aside anything that you have been thinking about for the moment, put aside those thoughts, and just for a moment relax into stillness. And from relaxing into stillness like this, think that I have this opportunity to place the body and the mind in a peaceful state.
치 롱지 뇨마르지 파 메바 차스는 체 도마노지 다 세데 파 할레베 쪼마 도마노 들지요 소바지.
When we are able to relax into the stillness, just like when water is still, the particles settle to the bottom, we will be able to clearly see the luminous, pure nature of our mind.
자초 첨부 눈자와 자첨부 세데 거용바 할레야가 내지요 소바지.
Vast and deep like the ocean, our mind is similar to that.
디파도 드바도 다 니모 공개용 롱질을 매봐. 어느 롱질에 사와. 어떤 여보지요 소바지.
Putting aside thoughts of the past, thoughts of the future, all of these lack true existence.
디파도 드바도 다 니모 롱질을 매봐. 아주 세대.
And the afflictions themselves, the mind is not in the nature of the afflictions.
shomba, niji, zewa, 다 대지도 가제 보게 대문도와 희나요 다시만도야 그런지 뭐지.
Love, compassion, patience. The more that we can hold these steadily within the mind, the more they will reveal the mind's true nature, the more they can be perfected. We also understand that the mind is a continuum. It is something that is working continuously, unbroken. And because of this mind's fundamental purity and clarity, it will allow us to achieve a state of happiness that is completely separated from suffering. In understanding this, when I consider my own obscurations, afflictions, and unwholesome karmas, I can see these as like the various layers of the skin of the onion that I need to peel back through practice to reveal the mind's true nature. Through the practices of method and wisdom, I can maximize the opportunity afforded by this human rebirth, this human body and intelligence. In order to be able to achieve that, I will make requests to the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas single-pointedly. Sorry, I just, to avoid any possible problems, I want to make sure the settings are correct for the prayers. Just a moment. Okay, all right, we're good. So we'll begin with the praise to Shakyamuni Buddha. Tumbal chom den de jin sheba dral chom ba yan da bar zo be sangye reba dang shab zu dem ba de war sheba je den gemba je budu kalo gyorwa lana meba ladamin hangi temba sanje chom dende pe jawa shakya tu bala chazelo jede chabzu ji o temba chonden de dejin sheba drachon bayan daba zobe sanje reba dang shazu demba dewa sheba jiten chemba chebu dewe kalo jurwa lana meba ladam minamgi temba sanje chomden de pe jawa shakya tubala chazelo jede gyazu ji ho temba chomden de dejin sheba drachon bayan daba zobe sanje reba dang shabsu demba dewa sheba jiten chemba chebu dewe kalo jurwa lana meba ladam minamgi temba sanje chomden de pe jawa shakya tubala chazelo chede kyabzu chi ho. Short mandala. Soji begi joji medo jamri rablingji ni sangye jindo mede buwaye na mendala ganiriyadayami. Refuge and Bodhisattva. Chedon sogi chenam la jangju bardu dani jabzu ji dagi chenyen gibe sonangi jola benjir sange jobar sho. Chedon sogi chenam la jangju bardu dani jabzu ji dagi chenyen gibe sonangi jola benje sange jobar sho. Chedan sogi chenam lai jangje bardu dani jabzu ji dagi chenyen jibe sonange jola benje sange jobar sho. Oh, Jesus. So Geshe-la's like, is everything okay? I think we're both a little para about the sound now. Is everyone hearing us clearly? Like, could you hear that chanting and everything or not? Okay, good.
Very nice.
Okay, all right, good. No, it's good. I'm glad, because, I know the chanting also. Okay, we're moving on. Yeah, and so it's very important, as usually mentioned, the activities at the beginning and the activities at the end. And part of the reason for this, of course, is so that the merits that we accumulate, that our effort in those merits is not wasted. So we have this kind of awareness that, when I engage in activities, sometimes I'm not mindful, I don't maintain attention throughout, paying attention to the beginning, the middle, and the completion. But today, as I am engaged in virtue, I will put effort to make this complete.
So for a lot of us, we'll actually have this experience, that when we think of unwholesome or maybe neutral activities, we're able to maintain that mindfulness somewhat more easily, and then the activity is very complete in the beginning, the middle, and the end. But because we are habituated to what is unwholesome or neutral rather than what is virtuous.
But what we'll find is that through our practice of meditation, and once again this word gom has this connotation of to familiarize, we'll familiarize ourselves with these positive minds, and what will happen is it will become easier and easier to maintain the mindfulness and attention in the beginning, the middle, and the end. So there's an example that's given. If there are 100 people attending an abhisheka, a Vajrayana empowerment, each one of those 100 people will have a completely different experience and full to totally incomplete actual reception of that empowerment. So we're distracted, right? And so in the same way, when we think about virtuous people in the world, there are many virtuous and kind people, right? But that kindness becomes more or less powerful, more or less complete, based upon the distraction by opposing factors such as self-cherishing. Yeah. So in this reason, right, that's why we always pay attention to this motivation, because we want to have a vast motivation of kindness in everything we do.
somba jachewa kaze pita boshuna tane yowa jachewa tembo tane tela tene divoyo te rawas tembo chi rawas.
The vaster that motivation of kindness, the more stable a foundation for the accumulation of the positive activity, and then based upon that, the greater hope we can have for a really significant, meaningful result. So in this way, let us take a moment to do a meditation to establish that focus and also to bring the 4 elements and so forth within our body into balance.
kaze chanyon ba de ga rong ge tane se de lu de de ya ita se de tane shawa do leleji.
So why do we want to bring these 4 elements into balance? Why is this important? Because when we bring the 4 elements into balance, the wind is in balance. And as we know, the wind and the mind always move together.
se mi ba yo bat un jung ru ge tole ta le jin jani ma ji ko na chu to ma chi.
So let us take our awareness and place it on the rising and falling of our breath and do our very best not to let the mind wander to other objects of focus. And remember that the focus that we're developing here is a mental focus. So we don't need to change the way that we're breathing or make it unnatural. Just breathe naturally. The body and mind are in equilibrium, at peace. Think that. In the space in front of us is a beautiful, bejeweled, pure land with a jeweled ground and many beautiful and precious things within it. And all of the facets of this physical environment, the trees, the lakes, and so forth, only bring forth bliss in the mind. There's nothing that arises suffering. The birds and other sentient beings, as they sing within this pure land, they only bring forth feelings of bliss. Everything sounds beautiful. And then within this space, we can imagine a beautiful throne made from precious substances that is held up by 8 white elephants, 2 on each side. And then upon this beautiful throne are 3 cushions of lotus, moon, and sun. And then seated upon this throne, to the best of your ability, visualize the conqueror Shakyamuni Buddha. one hand touching the ground, one hand in equipoise, and so forth. And then visualize appearing below the Buddha in this blessed space, row by row, the 35 Buddhas of confession. And each row of those appear in the color and the aspect of the 5 Dhyani Buddhas. Lakore Sushi. And then gazing up towards these objects of refuge with us are on either side of us our mother and our father, and all 6 types of sentient beings of samsara, but in human form. And think that together with us, based upon these factors of wholesome fear and faith, we're all single-pointedly going for refuge to these holy beings together. And imagine that, pleased with ourselves and the assembly of sentient beings, and with our single-pointed requests with faith, the 35 Buddhas and Shakyamuni emanate lights and nectar that fall like a rain of blessings upon the assembly of sentient beings. And we can visualize this purification in a detailed way, that just like ourselves, all the assembled sentient beings are in human form. And so then this rain of blessings from the holy being is received through the crown of the head and flows forcefully, completely cleansing the body of all negativities and obscurations. And imagine your body and the bodies of the assembled beings from this purification are clean and clear as crystal glass. From purifying our bodies, our minds in this way, then the seeds of love, compassion, and so forth that we plant in the soil of the mind can now flourish without obstruction. And then reaffirm this mind of refuge, thinking similarly from now, from lifetime to lifetime until enlightenment, I will go for refuge to the Buddha and the 35 deities of confession.
손지 거로 토반 노징아로 수이나요. 세지 유주가 치었나 세야돼. 다 손지 봐봐 저도 봐서 이 소마지 좀 주셨어요.
Based upon this purification and bringing forth these minds, that I call the I, that I call the self, through this practice I will bring to the state of complete enlightenment so that I can accomplish the welfare of all beings. Meditate on bodhicitta. May every single activity of hearing, contemplation, and meditation that I engage in become the cause of that enlightenment for the sake of all beings. So that is the preliminary motivation as well as the visualization. So if we don't purify our obscurations, right, whatever practice we do, if we don't engage in purification, then those obscurations will block us from the realizations we are seeking, right? Manjushri said this to Lama Tsongkhapa very clearly. So Manjushri, right, he bestowed all of the instructions for realizing the view on Tsongkhapa, but Tsongkhapa was not able to understand them. So Manjushri's instruction was, go into isolated mountain retreat. And once you reach that retreat, your first task is to engage in the purifications of negativity and obscuration. If you don't first prepare the ground of the mind through the practices of purification, no matter how many seeds of understanding you try to plant, they will not be able to sprout. So the Buddha, in the earlier exposition of the doctrine, in his later exposition of the doctrine, continuously taught impermanence. So when we think about impermanence as it relates to purification, right, the capacity of those negativities to abide is also impermanent. With the practice of purification, they can be cleared away and eventually completely exhausted. If non-virtuous karmas were truly existent, if they were permanent, then there would be no point in purifying because they would just continue to abide in perpetuity.
But
this is the one positive quality of these negative karmas, right? That they are impermanent, which means that they are momentary, changeable. So, similarly, love, compassion, and so forth, they are also impermanent. But unlike anger and the other afflictions, although they are changeable, they cannot be kind of wiped away or cleared away when they are well established. So within the various classes of impermanent phenomena, afflictions such as attachment, anger, and so forth, the way that their impermanence functions is such that if we cultivate their antidotes, they can reach a point of being exhausted, cleared away completely.
So
these are the qualities of the afflictions and anger, right? That if we cultivate the antidotes, they can be uprooted. So in this way, when we engage in purification, we should do it joyfully, understanding what's possible. And in this way also we understand our responsibility, the positive mental qualities that we develop, and every moment that we are either happy or unhappy. This is something that depends upon our own endeavor. It is a responsibility that lies in our own hand. It doesn't depend on others, actually.
The
Buddha states very clearly in the Sutras, I have pointed the path to liberation, to ultimate happiness. Whether you actualize that or not is in the palm of your hand. What does that tell us? No one else is responsible for that. And in fact, all the instructions are there. His Holiness the Dalai Lama often jokes about the part of the seven-limb practice where we request the turning of the Dharma wheel. He said if we were making the request to turn the Dharma wheel to the Buddha himself, the Buddha would say, I already turned the Dharma wheel. All of the instructions are there. It's simply up to you to cultivate them. And also somebody in the audience asked His Holiness, right, that the future Buddhas that come, right, in this aeon, the future Buddhas, will they be preaching something different than what Shakyamuni taught? And His Holiness answered, there's nothing better and nothing different that they could preach than the doctrine of the four Arya truths, the Four Noble Truths. So of course we have those Four Noble Truths as the basis, and then if we expand on that, each of those four has four aspects, and then we have those 16 aspects of those four Arya truths. So these are all teachings that we should be familiarizing ourselves with. And it's because on the basis of the Four Noble Truths and the 16 aspects that actually we can begin to increase our wisdom. So merely reciting the Four Noble Truths off the tip of our tongue, that's maybe fairly easy, but it's not enough, right? We need to be able to cultivate each of them based upon a thorough understanding of what they mean. And for that reason, right, as practitioners who are newer on the path, the holy beings advise that out of the two types of meditation, analytical meditation and placement meditation, for us, the analytical meditation is what is going to allow us to achieve that early improvement. And it is those bodhisattvas who are able to reach realization through cultivating thousands of reasonings that are considered the sharp faculty bodhisattva, right? And that's through a process of analysis or analytical meditation. So with all of these perfect preparations in place, we are going to engage in the exposition of the Confession of Downfalls, the 35 Buddhist practices. And so Geshe said that just in terms of some general advice for your own practice of purification. If you feel an affinity with the 35 Buddhas, you can practice that. If you prefer to cultivate Vajrasattva, you can also practice that. Or you can also alternate between the two, because all of these have the function of purifying negativities and obscurations. And so then also with the 35 Buddhas and so forth, we want to incorporate the 7 limbs to the practice if possible, and also even more important is to cultivate the 4 opponent powers of purification. And also, although it is said that reciting the name of each of these individual 35 Buddhas is able to purify all of these different karmas, sometimes immeasurable negative karmas, we understand that to fully be able to achieve that purification, that depends upon our understanding and also our mind's ability to engage with the practice. Otherwise, Geshe worries people have the impression like, all I need to do is read out this thing and I'm going to actualize all of that purification, right? So merely reading is not enough. We need to be really engaged with the practice. But does that mean that if we just merely read that it's not beneficial at all, that there's no purification? Of course, that's not the case. There is a little bit of purification, right, if we engage with a happy mind. And also, we also understand that karma is very subtle. So the purification that we're actualizing may not be immediately evident, right? It's a hidden phenomenon. It's also important to have an abiding respect for these deities, that it is through their cultivation of many virtues over an immeasurably long period of time, and the vows that they made to benefit beings, that empower their names so much that merely when we recite them, some purification is possible. And so Geshe said that also when you're engaging in the practice, of course, we did a brief meditation this morning. We went through the various colors and aspects in previous sessions. Ideally, you would build up the visualization slowly and mindfully. Take your time with it. Yep. So also, when we engage in the practice of purification, we can unfold the purification with a presentation of the 4 opponent powers, beginning with a focus on the power of the basis, next the power of the antidote, third, the power of the complete eradication, and fourth, the power of turning one's back on the fault, or the promise not to do it again. So, if we're able to combine this practice of the 7 limbs with the 4 opponent powers, very powerful purification is possible. We know this from the scriptures, from the story of Mahindra, right? And this is a story of patricide. The son killed his father, and he was very despondent and hopeless eventually. And then the Buddha said that if you engage in the practice of the 7 limbs, and especially the 4 opponent powers, then it is definitely possible to purify even the actions of immediate retribution, sometimes called the 5 heinous crimes. It is possible to purify even those. So it is said that Mahindra, in this story of Mahindra, that despite the being having committed patricide, killing his father, through a cultivation of the 4 opponent powers and meditation on emptiness, he was able to he was able to achieve the path of seeing of a Shravaka, the path of seeing of a hearer, despite having committed that terrible deed. So let's be really clear, right? That's a very serious negativity, a serious sin, to kill one's father. But what this story illustrates is that if we cultivate the antidotes and purify, realization is still possible, even having committed such a heinous crime. So we know that the story, right, why he committed patricide is he fell under the influence of an evil friend, right? So that's why there's that advice of abandoning harmful friends. That's very important. Through coming under his influence, he came to kill his father. But having developed a mind of regret and sought instruction in purification, he was able to reach realization. Goji den so jogin pe. So that shows us too that realization is possible, if it's possible even for a being who committed such a heavy negative action to realize emptiness, then definitely with purification we can realize emptiness.
And so
Geshe said that it's pretty clear for most of us, anyways he hopes it is, that in previous lifetimes we don't know, right, what heavy things we have done. But he's pretty sure that for all of you, you haven't killed one of your parents. So if it is possible to purify, for that being to purify the sin of having killed his parents, definitely we can purify our obscurations. And so when we hear about that possibility, right, purification is something that should make us feel glad, feel happy, help us bolster our efforts in our study and practice. Once emptiness is realized, then even as we continue to abide within samsara, we go from happiness to happiness. And so as we engage in the practices of purification, we should think how are unwholesome karmas accumulated. They are accumulated through the 3 doors of body, speech, and mind. So this is the case with virtues too. We accumulate virtues through the doors of body, speech, and mind, and we accumulate negativities through the doors of body, speech, and mind. And there's another presentation of how negativities are accumulated according to different scriptures. And in these teachings, they're called the 4 doors to the accumulation of faults. The 4 doors to the accumulation of faults. So the first of these 4 doors to the accumulation of faults is unknowingness. Unknowingness, not knowing. So thinking that, oh, I just don't know if something's right or wrong, right? We can't think that that's not a big deal, because that unknowingness is something that can lead us into many faults. So that's the first of the 4. Yeah. And so, of course, when we speak about how heavy a negative karma becomes, if we're knowingly engaging in that negativity, that is going to be heavier than unknowingly engaging with something that is negative. But still, that unknowingness does lead us to a negative accumulation, even if lighter. So because in these 4 doors to the accumulation of negativity, the first is unknowingness, what does that tell us? what's the antidote to this? We need to differentiate between what is wholesome and unwholesome. We need to have that wisdom. And then our behavior, our actions need to match up with that.
어데레 다 시바이나용 다 나로서 손지도 다 손지 선바술 기빠면아 요 걸어서 라바이나용 아주 싫어 찾아요 말이었어.
However, even if we have that knowledge, if we have a lack of respect and appreciation for the people that bestow that knowledge, for example, the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, we're less likely to actually follow those instructions to guard our ethics. So a lack of respect, you could also translate this actually as a lack of appreciation. A lack of respect or a lack of appreciation is the second door to the accumulation of faults.
나로서 뭐든지 바로 와서 뭐지 가디 나 라자야 보주지 자게나 당간수 년이 맞어 그것도 가디나 될라 그래 됐다 좋다고 말한다고 나니까
Yeah, so think about your life, right? Sometimes it's really hard to take advice from other people, isn't it? We just think, oh yeah, he or she is always kind of saying the same thing and they are just always saying that, so I'm not going to take particular attention to that, right? They could be saying some very good and useful advice, actually.
다 대역되는 마기 바디요는 내서 시바이나요 오고과 네 받고 왔어.
So really, like with that lack of respect or appreciation, even if we have knowledge of a situation, even if we're able to understand that some advice is good, we'll be very disinclined. We won't be likely to follow it. The third door to the accumulation of faults is heedlessness. You could also probably translate this as lack of mindfulness. So heedlessness, that's the third one. So these are all really important, right, if we want to be able to decrease our unwholesome karma. So the third is heedlessness. And the fourth one, which is actually the very most important of the four, is strong afflictions, or a more afflicted mind. And so what instruction do we cultivate connected with that last one, strong afflictions? Part of what that means is we have to look at ourselves honestly. What affliction is more prevalent? Do we experience more? Are we more of an angry person? Do we experience more of attachment? And whichever affliction is predominant, we should focus on the antidote to that. So, understanding these four doors to the accumulations of faults and being able to cultivate the antidotes to those four doors, it gives us a new start. What was unwholesome can become wholesome, just as the moon can be parted from the clouds and shine its light. Yeah. So Geshe also wants to encourage you with a bit of a practice. He's noticed that everybody loves to accumulate a mantra, right? So we often go around with our mala and we accumulate a mantra. But if you were to use the mala to count and go through essential teachings like this, like the four doors to the accumulation of faults, so you could remember them, that would also be excellent. Yeah. There's a story in the scriptures of a holy being who was a mantra practitioner, right? He was accumulating many, many mantras. And at the end of his practice, he looked at what he had achieved and he said, "My afflictions have not waned, but my fingernail has definitely waned." Yeah, so we don't want to be like that. So within these four opponent powers, the power of the basis is extremely important. We've covered some of that. And so when we speak about the powers of the basis, these are most frequently given as refuge and bodhicitta. And so in the commentaries, bodhicitta comes a little bit later. We start with refuge.
하고서라 땡저 또용 조지디 장도 되래.
So the door that opens the Buddha's teachings for us is this practice of refuge, and also the power of the basis of purification is also refuge.
땡저 또서 떼서야 될 것도 니요사라 왔어.
And when we speak about basis, or we could say foundation, this could be understood in two different ways.
하고서라 어느 떼서야 될라 하고서라 디파쇼 비칼 코로 짜 침보 임비 차네라. 니파 침보 임비 차네 떼서야지.
Tenpo double. Tenpo. Ale. Okay. Yes. So going to this word ten. Yeah. So so the word ten in Tibetan actually has two connotations. It can mean a foundation or a basis. It can also mean a firmness. So the first connotation of the power of the basis is actually this idea of firmness or steadfastness in the practice, something steady.
스페는 아주 쿠바자비가 사전 딩걸 쿠바자는 여보 저게 가르 때때 뭐요 와스 돈지 베지도요.
So when we're going to construct a building or a house in a particular place, we say that the foundation is very steady, right? So therefore we can build a good house on top of that. So there's that connotation of steadiness is very important.
다 대노지 짠도도 세세니 때또 첨보 짜 첨보다 니바 첨보래서 요아레스.
And so with steadiness and firmness in refuge and bodhicitta, then the basis becomes something that is kind of very powerful and strong.
다용 때 땡저 또 때서야 될 것도 연다 질잖아. 예빠 용사시.
텐기톱.
땡저 또 때서야 될라. 예빠 용사시.
Another way to understand this is the word ten is that it can also be the basis from which faults arise. The basis from which faults arise. 뉴몽 용사.
예빠 용사시 하고서라 빼는 예빠 용사시 될야. 야저와 이나 손지도 샤도 샤마레
알레
샤요
yeah
하고서라 마저와 이나 신도와리 주센제.
So how does it work when we think of the basis in the context of the basis through which we accumulate negativity? It is said that we accumulate the basis of negativity primarily on two groups of beings, the Buddhas and sentient beings.
하고서라 다테 자고 그 같이 버리도 와서 쇼바도니지 쇼주지 세 곰바티가 때 생절라테는 슈이 디바트 파쇼.
So love, compassion and bodhicitta, when we bring forth these minds, it's the basis for purifying the negativities that we've accumulated on the basis of other sentient beings.
그래서 다테 미테에서 소노토는 간조 지세 텐데 요아레스. 간조 야예가 뭐도 던로를 가보마도 마시바 이나요. 하고서라 언니빠 가제지 과도 그랬어. 기보메베 소아 뭐지 메바 저도 그랬어.
양ger선다.
베나 소소게 소소 야예 뭐도 던로 설이나요. 가보도 쇼바지 요나. 예빠 뭐뭐 지텔라테는 과기도 왔어.
And cultivating this love and compassion, how is that a purification? In a very visible, practical way, we can understand this, that if we practice love and compassion towards those sentient beings, the human beings who we're encountering every day, how much less negativity are we accumulating when we approach others with love and compassion instead of something else?
Yeah,
on the basis of even just a small amount of love, for example, many of the negative feelings that we have about another being are already dissipated. And if we understand how that works, then we can understand how great love, great compassion, and bodhicitta are powerful enough to purify so many negativities that we've accumulated on the basis of many, all sentient beings. So if we check carefully with reasoning, right, purification has a reason as to why it works. So when we speak about refuge, right, we can speak of refuge in two senses, the common refuge and the uncommon refuge. And then when we speak about bodhicitta, then this is an even more powerful power of the basis. So we have these two practices of refuge and bodhicitta. So this is very important. Jungtes drogogi. So this is very important. So these are all different explanations of the practice of the basis. Geshe hopes that those are helpful. Yeah. And then we have the power of the antidote. And in the case of this particular practice, the power of the antidote is the 35 Buddhas, specifically their names. Nishu. So up until now, we have covered 20 of these 35 Buddhas, their names, and the benefits of reciting it. Geshe said if I don't go through more of the 35 Buddhas' names, Kedrup is going to complain. No, I just want to make sure that we get to the end of this by next week. Yeah. So we're on page 13 for those of you with the text. So we're to the Tathagata sorrowless glory I prostrate. So this purifies negativities associated with the fog of ignorance. And this is important, right? Because ignorance is always related to negativity. The next one, to the Tathagata son of non-craving I prostrate. And this is said to purify negativities related to the afflictions as well as the imprints or the latencies left behind by those afflictions. So this is actually really important. Have you ever noticed that sometimes you just feel unhappy, despondent, depressed for no reason whatsoever? There's no identifiable reason. That means that it's that bakchak, that imprint, or that karmic latency, that negative karmic latency that's leading to that feeling of, how do we say that? Discontent. That's a good word. Discontent. Yeah. Sometimes this can even have a physical manifestation, right? Like you might feel some real sort of pain in your body, but you go like to the doctor and they're not able to identify any type of physical problem. That could be another manifestation of this. So these are coming from imprints left behind by negative karmas, and they can also be lenchak. They can also come through something called lenchak. Lenchak I would translate as karmic debts. So very useful to recite this, which helps us to purify the latencies, the imprints left behind by negativity. The next one, to the Tathagata glorious flower I prostrate. This purifies bodily obscurations. So you can think about this in a vast way, principally obscurations or negativities that happen due to bad actions of physically that we've committed. Dejin sheba zampe is a number roba kempala chasara. So karete? To the Tathagata pure light rays clearly knowing by play. So this purifies obscurations accumulated via speech. So if you think about the example of Vasubandhu, right, and remember the story of his tongue, it is through our tongue that most of us accumulate so many of our negativities. So we have to be careful with that. And there's a nice story connected with that too, which Geshe will share during this series. To the Tathagata lotus light rays clearly knowing by play, this is primarily obscurations accumulated mentally.
다 이제 저와서 다 리도 되는 거 아니다. 그 점마모도야 알아서. 또 세대래요. 알아서.
Yeah. So also we understand that when we think about things accumulated physically or through speech, the main driver of these things, of these negativities, is actually the mind.
다 레카체네 맞잖아. 이게 다 디벨레 뭐서요. 알아서.
Yeah, and so, and even when we seem to be resting, right, our mind could still be engaging with negativities, accumulating negativity.
내가 신나 개어요 뭐서 가서 이나 다 잡아만 누지 돼한테 왔어. 지발했어.
But the nice thing is, with the power of knowledge through our practice, then in those empty moments when the mind is working, it's more likely to be accumulating virtue than something negative.
다 니시 자주 봐. 노발라 상자로.
대신 제발 노펠라. 노펠라 차슬라. So sorry. So just have to make sure I'm on the right name. So to the Tathagata glorious wealth I prostrate. Yeah, no, Geshe said sometimes it's just a dialect thing, right? Sometimes I want to make sure we're on the same page.
다 디게더니 가래 겐더지 꼬 투피냐 봐.
Genjun Yenje.
말해 겐더지 꼬.
Kor. So when we recite to the Tathagata glorious wealth, this purifies a very specific negativity, misappropriating the property of the Sangha. Misappropriating the property of the Sangha.
다비 겐바 아니 겐바 다 던지 다 녀녀 앞이치요 다 던지겠다니 잘라 초바도 다 던지면서 뭐 알아왔어.
So especially like if we're in like a nun's community or a monk's community, if we're not using those resources correctly or something, like that can be an accumulation of this fault. Is purified through this.
네. 다 녀시 짜디 봐 템비 봐라. 템비 봐라 상자로 구자라 거와다 비냐 봐. 할래바지.
Kangsakla?
거와다 봐.
Kowata basana?
거와다 봐 시제체 봐.
Kinjichepa. Ale.
To
the Tathagata glorious mindfulness I prostrate. So the recitation of this name purifies our harsh criticism, our scolding of other sentient beings. So it purifies that. So Geshe said that in the particular, this scolding of this other person, this is when we scold without reason. If what we're scolding them for is something they didn't do or something that's out of their control, this purifies that. Also some stories connected with that, which yeah. To the Tathagata glorious name widely renowned, the recitation of this purifies negativity that we've accumulated through jealousy. To the Tathagata king holding the victory banner of foremost power, this purifies negativities accumulated with pride. To the Tathagata glorious one totally subduing I prostrate. This purifies negativities related to divisive speech. If we say something knowing that this is going to cause division between two people, for example. And so that goes for whether it's two people, a group of 3, 4, or 5. If we say something that causes those people who formerly got along to be alienated from each other, that's divisive speech.
Oh, yeah, that is one?
Yeah.
This one?
Yeah, loso. Yula Namba Jawa. To the Tathagata utterly victorious in battle purifies negativities related to all types of affliction. Eh? So to the Tathagata glorious transcendence through subduing purifies negativities that we accumulate through ordering another person under our power to engage in a negative action or influencing them to engage in negative action. To the Tathagata glorious manifestations illuminating all, this happens through a feeling of rejoicing or gladness in a negative deed. I think Lama Zopa Rinpoche calls this negative rejoicing, which I think really works. So,
선지 소지 봐 러치뼈마 chansola
Rinchen Pemala.
다티 치punga 레거드바
To the Tathagata all-subduing jewel lotus, this purifies the heavy negative karma of abandoning the Dharma.
다 제수지래서 치punga 레서나
And that's actually one of the heaviest negativities imaginable.
성가 바롱게 잡아라 chansolos
Yeah. And so then, the 35th, to the Tathagata Arhat, perfectly complete Buddha, king of the Lord of mountains, firmly seated on jewel and lotus.
라마라 까와타니 다 소소가 돈신용 발라소바다 되는에서 뭐요 알아왔지
So this relates to degenerated commitments that we have from our spiritual teachers, degenerated relationships that we have with our spiritual teachers. This purifies all of that. Yeah. And so then the 35 names of the Buddhas have been explained, and we understand that in the context of this practice, the 35 names are actually the power of the antidote within the four powers. And so now we go to the next power, which is the power of complete eradication.
Yeah, so
that went really fast. I won't go as fast, but I'll try to go relatively fast. All you 35 Buddhas and the others, as many Tathagata Arhat, perfectly complete Buddha Bhagavans, as there are, abiding, living, and residing in all world systems of the 10 directions, all Buddha Bhagavans, pay attention to me. So that's on page 17. As we recite this, imagine that you're speaking to these beings just as you would speak to another person. There should be a feeling of closeness here. So we're really asking for the regard of these holy beings, saying, I want to engage in this very meaningful, important practice of purification. Therefore, please heed what I am saying now. So, bringing forth a mind of sincere regret, I'm engaging today really wanting to be able to confess and purify my negativities. And so what negativities are we bringing forth regret and wanting to confess? This comes in the next verse. In this life and in all states of rebirth in which I have circled in samsara from beginningless lives, whatever negative actions I have created, made others create, or rejoiced in the creation of. So we see here these are 4 different negative accumulations that we are confessing specifically. Yeah, so we see that as we go through these verses, it's kind of sort of parting out the specific negativities, and we're confessing them specifically. And so then the next verse, it's negativities of possessions of holy objects of offering, so misappropriated offerings, possessions of the Sangha of the 10 directions that have appropriated, made others appropriate, or rejoiced in the appropriation. Whichever of the 5 heavy negative karmas without break I have done, caused to be done, or rejoiced in the doing of, so that's the 5 actions of immediate retribution. Whichever of the 10 non-virtuous paths of action I have engaged in, caused others to engage in, or rejoiced in the engaging of. So all of those negativities related to, for example, the 10 non-virtuous karmas, I confess each of those up individually. So then, if we are what are the specific results of these negativities and of their purification.
레저 저와 공기 전에 다세년 영화 쳐와곰 tradition에서 쳐와곰 이다지 쳐와고 예타고도 쳐와고 라로셔와고 라저르 모노서 쳐와고 우마마송아 저와 따와로 반서반 저와 순윤주와는 이바 맞바지 레저 저와 공라바테도 또 소지죠 된데
Whatever I have done being obscured by these karmas that cause me to be reborn as a sentient being in the hell realm, in the animal realm, in the Preta realm, in an irreligious country, as a barbarian, as a long-lived deva with imperfect faculties, holding wrong views, or not being pleased with a Buddha's descent. In the presence of the Buddha Bhagavans who are transcendental wisdom, who are eyes, who are witnesses, who are valid, and who see with omniscient consciousness, I admit and confess all these negative actions. I do not conceal them nor hide them, and from now on in the future I will abstain and refrain from committing them again. So here we're disconcealing, like we're laying bare. Ale chik nga ki cheba chik
nga tholo sa ngar shenga tholo sa chidwa
anga su kawa yere ta pe chusan gangla mepa dang tamche sangye chomden de yeshi nga su kawa sangye chomden de deshin cheba tamche gonsu so dagi gipa dang kawa ye
a je ponde cheba chema cheba chembe cheba ta ge shenga tholo chwa som
kawa ko sir dilang la yomare chichena
yodi tana pe si mar 순진주와는 이봐 지엘레 제대로 도저 수지 쪼된데 이시스 좀 본데 좀 단다게도 다스 다 된다 가르치기 하세나 뭐하니라 영안이 받던 주소 세근노는 당간지 바시거든 다 대지 강가 매바서 그거도
So all of these negativities that I have been brought up, what I want to do is what I want to be able to confess them. Oh, I see. I want to abstain from committing them again.
마차포 마베도 세르 마차바세나 송와마조
Yes.
송와조 메스 나파메 소시보조기
And I'm going to admit and confess them and really purify. I'm not going to try to conceal or hide them. 미베도.
저번에 가서 녀바 가서 조아이나 nga 스칠 때도 라그메 송와조기 선 할레베 녀바티 고 사본로기 하레스.
So the concealment is really important because when we engage in a negative action with a specific intention that I'm going to make sure that nobody finds out about this. I'm going to keep this hidden. That increases the negative potential exponentially. If when you engage in a negative thing, in a negative action, you have a different mentality and you think, you know what? I'm going to just try and be honest about this. I'm not going to try to conceal this fault or this negativity. Then that negative action is actually less heavy.
Yep.
So then, when we say, in the future, I will abstain and refrain from committing them again, that's the power of the promise, the fourth opponent power, turning one's back on the fault. And so this power of the promise is something that is extremely important for a complete purification. So if we don't make a promise to abstain, to turn our back on the fault at least a little bit, then we can't have a complete purification. This is clear in the instructions of the holy beings. Yeah. And of course, Geshe said different lamas will give different instructions. Some say, like, you never do it again. But even if we promise to refrain from it for a time and so forth, that's an aspect of the power of the promise. So that's a good start. Yeah. So there's a ritual for the monks and the nuns known as the poshada, or as the sojang, where they confess any vow breakages. And as part of the words of this ritual, it's like, I confess and I will never do again, something along those lines. And so Geshe said that during one of these sojang rituals, one of the monks stood up and he said, you guys are all dishonest because you're saying that I'm never going to do any of these negativities again. And so that's like misleading. He says, I always say, I'm going to try my best. I'm going to try my best to decrease. Yeah. And so actually, this part of the Sojang ritual, it's accumulated using the words that come from the general confession, which we'll actually get to next week. So it's where you say that you'll never do it again. So he made that critique.
So Geshe
said, we've gotten well through the text, and although we have not completed it, we've covered all the essential aspects as they relate to these four opponent powers.
Yep.
Another thing, just to clarify here, is that some people may have heard the order of these four differently. Different lamas do give different presentations. So some will begin with the power of the basis. Some will actually say that the first one is the power of complete eradication, that's connected with regret, and so forth. So there are different ways of teaching this. But all of the lamas say, right, that the power of complete eradication, that one that connected with regret, that this is absolutely necessary in a practice of confession. Without that, there can't be purification. And how does that power of complete eradication, that regret, become truly effective or not? It's related directly to the amount of faith, of confidence that we have in cause and effect. If we have a proper understanding and faith in the law of karma, of cause and effect, then the regret, the power of complete eradication that we bring forth in this practice will be very full, and subsequently all of the other remaining three powers will also be able to be practiced. So in this way, hopefully all of us now understand a little bit about these four opponent powers and how to cultivate them. And hopefully we will cultivate these four opponent powers regularly as an antidote to the negative karmas we accumulate and the afflictions that drive those accumulations. And so in this way also to achieve a method of liberation from the heaviness of these negative karmas is something very wonderful, so we should rejoice. So in that way, that brings us to the end of the lesson today, so let us dedicate the merits. If you need to get on with your day afterwards, feel free, but you're also welcome for questions. Changju senjo rinpoche maje panam jejurji chewan yamba me bayang gone gondo bewar sho toni tawa rinpoche maje panam jejurji chewan yamba me bayang gone gondo bewar sho jambe bao jidar kyamba tang gundu zambo de an de jinde de da gongi jesu da lo chir gewa de da tam je radungo dusun shebe gewa tam je ge ngowa ganai chodu ngaba de da yi gewe tsawa di gungyang zambo jeji radungo wargi.
Roje kangi ta gyawasa pe Nepal atene. Koi ne kawala hina senji sili hina lichi kangi senji kangi kandichi hina pa.
Through the power of the merits accumulated here through both myself and others, may all of the physical and mental suffering experienced by every sentient being within samsara be completely dispelled. So also we can think specifically that through the merits accumulated, may all of those beings suffering due to the wars currently being fought in the world, may that suffering be completely dispelled, and may they be able to bring forth thoughts of peace and happiness. Through the power of these merits, may all my negativities accumulated since beginningless rebirths in samsara be completely purified, and in this way may I realize all my aims and happiness. Through these merits, may I be able to see the positive qualities of every being, see them as attractive, something virtuous, and develop a feeling of closeness. So we'll pause there. So we opened, Geshe said we're a bit over. We usually stop about after an hour and a half, but yeah, in this way we covered a lot of the text, so it's good. Questions? Geshe does see a yellow hand, so whoever has the yellow hand up, please go ahead.
It's Deki Lee here.
Hi there, Deki Lee.
Hello. When I was a nun at Chenrezig Institute and we did a Bodhisattva retreat, a student said he repeatedly was doing a practice on something he'd done. And Geshe Tashi Tsering, who was the Lama there, said, "What doing? You purified it the first time."
Okay. So he was, just so to make sure I understand, he was like kind of confessing a specific thing again and again. And then, okay. Yeah.
And so some of my interpretation of it was, the whole idea of Christian base of sin and guilt and not being able to kind of get over it. And I think he was going, wait a minute, this is Buddhism. You do that. You already did it.
Right, like it's already been confessed. Why are you dwelling on it?
I think we had discussions on, well, what's, so maybe Geshe could comment or elaborate.
Sure. Nganso di ngama di ko ani kaplula ya Chenrezig chusuk dene michik dorje sempe samgi kaplula ya ko digpa champuchik yangsi shakso yangsi kyosem kuso dene dela tene di ko Geshe Tashi Tsering cheshi jaso dene Geshe Tashi Tsering chikdi yangsi droya kare chesons ngama jangsa redua dene Geshe lagi labia di gimsen kandes chik yores nganso di chik yona dene chik parshana dene yangya shago mares yangmana nganso yishu gi samlo tang la tene kadi yene samso kyesen dabo chik nyarna pendop mendus rangi samso kare yosa.
Yeah, mare ta ngachine ge tesu gojire. Ani chosete nyane sosol kangezo waina. Te kadino peto mundus.
So Geshe is just positing, he doesn't know, but he's just positing that actually in this case, what Geshe Tashi Tsering may have seen is that person continuously holding on to regret for that action again and again was actually not useful for him anymore. Wasn't useful to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
And we can see that, right? If we obsess over a mistake and we kind of dwell on it and think about it again and again, that can make us unhappy or depressed, right? So maybe he saw that's what was happening.
Ale.
Yeah. Ale, loso. Ale. So Geshe doesn't think that it's necessarily a bad thing that he was maybe thinking of, that heavy thing that he did again and again, of a way of purifying it, but it would start to become not useful if he was starting to get tight and depressed about it. So what Geshe would say is that, like, you could start with thinking about, and we're actually encouraged to think about, a specific heavy negative action as the way to generate that purification. But then, right, if that's becoming something that is disturbing the mind, we can then start to think in a kind of more general way, like, similar to that deed, all of the negativities that I've accumulated from beginningless lifetimes until now, I develop regret and confess these.
Okay.
So he thinks maybe that's what happened, right? It was making him unhappy to dwell on that.
Is there a Tibetan word for guilt versus regret?
Guilt, no. We have shame, we have regret, but I and in fact, Dekili, I asked this at a translators meeting we had, and nobody was able to give me a word for it. I explained it to Geshe as kind of like a heavy feeling of feeling really bad about something that you did.
Okay, big cultural difference.
It is, for sure. Yeah. And Geshe also said that maybe he was lacking a perspective about that negative action that he felt bad about, right? Because that's one negative action in one lifetime, which is just a drop in the bucket of our countless lifetimes in samsara, in negativity. So sometimes it's good to move on and also purify those. So momentary, right? The momentariness of that, that's really important to be aware of as well.
I can also see the power of rejoicing every time versus living with the guilt that it wasn't finished.
Rejoicing in what? Sorry.
At the end of each purification.
Oh, right.
Sitting there with this dredge of guilt still there.
Yeah. Nganso digpa shane digpa jangne dene Jesu rangna digido aderinga yapo sha tu samado jen kadine swala kide. So that's a very important point, Geshe said. And in fact, when we come to the point of the practice where we're visualizing the lights and nectars and the dissolving of the holy being, at that point he really advises rejoicing in that I've been able to confess and purify well. Yeah. So actually, rejoicing is mentioned, and it is really something we need to pay attention to in the practice. And also, for a lot of people in the practice of purification, they'll have very clear dreams that specific karmas have been purified, like different manifestations of dreams that will indicate a powerful purification, right? And when that happens, right, it's really easy to rejoice. But a confidence in the power of these practices, that when we conclude them, we really think, I have been able to achieve a measure of purification. That's really important too. And we can have confidence in this because in terms of actions actually being unwholesome, the fact that there are these unwholesome negative actions, the Buddha taught that very clearly. It's in the scriptures. The fact that these actions can be purified is also in the scriptures. So this is a very sound, grounded practice.
다 가세 다가요면 소설 다지래. 다 다가요.
How much of the negativity we purify or don't purify depends on us, on our effort and engagement with the practice, right?
딜로자와 노지레스. 다 다파 가세마 다 도요면 사스다.
It's like washing our clothes, right? We can kind of wash them and get the rough stains out, but not get them perfectly clean. It's a little bit like that, right?
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome, Zekili. You're welcome. Anybody else?
Hello?
Hi, Rudy. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Now, I was wondering about death and suicide. I've met some people in the past who have suffered tremendously, some from psychological issues, but some people are in such an extreme physical pain, 24 hours a day with no relief from medication or anything like that. And they want to die, and some of them have taken care of it themselves, but sometimes they have requests for help. What would happen in that case if you helped somebody?
Yeah. Nganso tanda ready tesji ko sabochi to jungin he so yang yore ro mi mambochik kashe kongso semgi kangel tene kongso rangjin seagi de pa yore sine mambochik kongso halepe natsa dukchachik kaduyene mi deagi tsujaya chikla tene kongso kewa jemala droning drogi tua dene midi ropa chero ches so ningjela tene chik ropa chena dene le kandes chiksa giresa.
다대 야다 베트 소셔가 레카체나 테즈는 요 말스. 나도 전에
So
아이나 콜타 가제타 다 페세도 들리게 돈이 레카 로파 제가 다시 소카라와스.
So Geshe-la's first response to this would be that, like, from his perspective, right, and from a faith perspective, he can't really condone the taking of a life, right? He can't really condone helping someone to take their life. But of course, the heaviness of the negativity will be tempered by if we did it for a compassionate reason, for somehow, even if mistaken, thinking that that's going to help give some relief to that person. We do have to take that into account in terms of the heaviness. But he would also say that the person who wants to end their life thinking that is the best solution, that this comes from an unknowingness, right? It comes from not really understanding the situation. They just think, okay, like, once I do this, the pain is going to end, right? But maybe they're not thinking about where they go in the future. And that should also be part of the consideration, right? Because we don't know where we're going to go in the next life, right? It could be somewhere better. It could be somewhere worse. Like if we're going to a place where we're suffering from tremendous heat and so forth all the time, it wouldn't be, better than the situation of that illness. Geshe doesn't say this in any connotation of judgment for anyone, right? He has a lot of sympathy and also just a lot of understanding that people have this view because of unknowingness, right? Because they're not able to think of the big picture. Yeah, so Geshe said normally, like, we want to help to relieve the suffering of people as much as we can, but with a request like this, that's something we really need to be careful about, right?
Okay, I'm just thinking some people, the pain is so extreme.
There's
little room for thinking.
Yeah, konso samlo tantugi mendus karin sena sujaya di halepe diti nyomba dabo chagire zoya mendu dabo chi. Yeah. No, Geshe says you're right, and he does know that this is something that's extremely difficult. It's a difficult point.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, yeah, you're welcome. Anybody else?
Hey, it's Dinah. Hello.
Hi, Dinah. How are you? Go ahead.
Good. Yeah, I found a definition of these practices that they help purify obstacles to our life and untimely death that are due to the exhaustion of our merit. And how does that happen? It's like we're not accumulating enough merit, that That's the exhaustion. And the other thing is when I see the term untimely death, what pops into my head every time is that, well, any death is untimely, right?
Yes.
So can you describe what untimely death actually means?
Sure. Nganso dipashaya gi pain samlo thangna. Dene nganso tsering gi barche chik mepa sogo gre dua. Ane tutsu mayimpa gi chiwadi tets mepa sogo gre dua. Di khandes chik chagires. Ane yang tutsu mayimpa gi shiwa khandes samlo thangire. Karin sana misuyana tutsu mayimpa gi shiwa samlo thangire dua. Nganso tanya poyana tutsu mayimpa gi shiwa khandes chik hakogures tsikti.
Me da tedo nganso min ngisa thoya to lila o marwas. Pena le ti shawa ngama mati so so le shawa ngama ti ga.
Yeah.
Loja de ga le chi sa yo na.
Yep.
Ako so. Da so so se jele ne ba shi so mangamba chi tela tene. Ako sara le to yo are tene ina ti ba che shi ne la. Ti mayimba la. On nyota ga ya tene.
So dipasane dene lojadi tets. Okay, so Geshe said that let's clarify what we mean by untimely death, what that word means. So it is said that like we kind of come into the present lifetime with the karma for a specific lifespan. So for ease of example, let's say that lifespan is 100 years. But as we go through our life, we might engage in certain negativities, especially negativities related to harming or killing others. So what can happen is, due to those negativities, then that lifespan will be directly shortened substantially. So that can be one understanding of what an untimely death means. It means we came in with kind of like the past life karma for that specific lifespan, but due to certain negative actions, there's obstacles to being able to reach the end of that lifespan. And also, it can also happen in a different way, right? There might be 100-year lifespan meritorious karma that we've accumulated, but karma is something kind of very, very subtle. And there might be other negativities that we've accumulated even in previous lifetimes, which, if the conditions manifest, those can ripen into an obstacle, making us unable to reach that lifespan. And also, the other thing to understand is if we engage in that present lifetime in an activity that harms or kills sentient beings, that can be a very powerful condition for similarly negative karmas accumulated in the past to ripen into the result of an obstacle to meeting that lifespan. Yeah. So it's almost like, you can think of it almost as like you've perfectly kind of tilled and prepared this field and planted all these seeds in it, and then somebody comes and plonks a bunch of rocks on top of it, right? Then the plants aren't going to be able to reach their height, right? It's a bit like that.
And so the merit that we accumulate by doing all these practices, if I do have an untimely death, then it will that will benefit me in my next life somewhat.
Oh, okay. Then nganso tanda nyamlen sayadi nganso tutsu mayimba gi shiwa chik lebna, then nganso kewa jema la pengire bes.
Mara shiwa jima mge tanda loy petu momo yo ares. Le to chimbo ina loy to che yum jese momo yo ares.
Loso ine ko tutsu mayimba gi shiwa dabo chik chungna dene ko legi drebu den so yong tu gyo mare sangi do. Yeah, dene kewa jema Yeah, you will be able to get the benefits of those practices that you engage in the future lifetime, but you'll also still be able to have other benefits in this lifetime, even if the death is untimely. Yeah. But Geshe just wants to clarify that sometimes, even if there is an obstacle that's manifesting for an untimely death, sometimes the case is such that the practices you engage in now, they will purify that obstacle and you'll be able to reach that lifespan. So some lamas with clairvoyance, right? There's a lot of lamas with clairvoyance, and they'll tell people, you know, like that car crash you were in, where everybody else died, you were actually like supposed to die with them. But because of the practices that you engaged in, you were able to purify that obstacle of untimely death. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. You're welcome, Dinah. But Geshe said definitely, like it's really, because we don't understand the subtle workings of karma, it's really hard to say whether a positive action we do is going to ripen fully in that lifetime, or if that's something that has to play out in a future lifetime. Yeah. And also it is said that like very powerful merits, they're more likely to kind of be able to ripen in this lifetime, and then others will ripen in future lifetimes. So there's also stories of monks who were able to purify a projecting karma that would have had them be reborn as a preta, as a hungry ghost in a future lifetime, by experiencing some difficulties in that present lifetime, right? So that the purification can work like that as well. Yeah. Yeah.
Sayina noji.
Ale, loso. Yeah, hagoso. Yeah.
Ina itawa kashi pashu lone la. Chigi pagejana lesa hares.
Ale, loso.
Hagoso. Tumbo siji ichi yo mare.
Ale.
Yima tari chigi ina pashu yo.
Ale.
Chigi.
Yeah.
Tere sunjil kecha tibikala. Oh, yudaga no ma mene la.
Ale.
Kichate matonga res.
Ale, loso. So there is a story about a monk who was to be reborn as a hungry ghost. And so there were some monks that were seeing kind of a river, and there was no bridge on that river. So they were using the chugu, they were using the yellow robe to cross it. And they go on the ko chudima tone ko shison donda.
Chete mashiman duas kochi tsasu de aravas tabaji nyando.
Ale.
Yida no mo ndibule ni la.
Ale.
Chete tonyo mare.
Tonyo mares. Then you dro tupa chugu pesho matane. Ale koma son kene konda jundi pasha. Yeah. So we'll tell that story later. Geshe and I need to prepare, but it's basically a story about how that karma as a hungry ghost kind of ripened for him in that life.
Me yida ndo mo gene yida no mo chuji la tene me wa chaso res le du cha.
Koma son konda.
So
from experiencing that obstacle, the karma that would have led him to be reborn as a hungry ghost, it was actually purified in that lifetime, rather than him having to meet something difficult in the future. Okay, next question. Yeah. So next question.
Right, Steve.
Thank you. Good morning, Geshe. Good morning, Kedra.
Thanks.
I have two questions. What is the Tibetan word for shame, for my own translations? And secondly, is it possible for us to purify the misdeeds of others through practices such as the Confession Sūtra or Dorje Semba?
Is it possible to purify what? Sorry, Steve.
The misdeeds or bakchak of others through practices such as the 3 heaps or Dorje Semba.
So I'll take the second question first. Nganso tungshak tang Dorje Semba gi gyune mi jenda gi digpa jang tu girebesa.
Mi jenda gi digpa. 다 배도 요야 된대 요아래 소소대와 제주도 들이 요아래 와서 차총아 다서는 내라고 말했어.
To completely purify their negativities, we couldn't say that. But to purify some of the heaviness of the negativity, definitely. Especially depending on the relationship that we have with that person. Like if we have a close relationship. And they go on the agenda di nganso semchung ngachungi nigi nangla. Ngotsa chikyore ane ngotsa dene agenda chikyore ngotsa dabo chikyore. It's Cheya, Steve, but I think I better send you the spelling of this. I'll send it to you. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for that. Thank you.
You're
that was
welcome.
very helpful.
No worries, no worries.
배도 몇 번만 된대 말다스 배도 요아래.
So in terms of like doing these practices to help others to purify, there definitely is some benefit.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Dave. Yes.
Yeah, Geshe mentioned that it was from not understanding karma properly that we were not mindful of negativity, and so I feel like I need to understand karma a little bit better. Can Geshe recommend a text or how do I understand karma better so that I'm better able to avoid negativity?
Yeah. Nganso di bak me la tene di pasai gi go chikre dua ane bak me leje selpo chene hama koya gi gim sen chikyores tene leje selpo ha koya gi jung deb yapo chikyores deb kare tagores so leje kola shipra chene hama kona.
다 렌데 콜스트라지나 마코는 세나다 로르는 시원 디카토는 대신 뭐 지야 대지야 보지다 가레스.
So the middle scope of the Lamrim text, actually any of the Lamrim texts, if you look at the middle scope, it gives very thorough explanations of karma or cause and effect. And also there's a very thorough explanation of karma in Kunzang Lame Jelung, Words of My Perfect Teacher, as well. And Geshe will be explaining that. Yeah. So if you can look at the Lamrim text, the middle scope section, the teachings on karma, that's very useful, and also hearing some teachings on that are also very useful. Another thing that can be very helpful is also to look at the stories of the previous lifetimes of the being who became the Buddha. So for example, the Jataka stories. This can also be very helpful for helping us to develop an understanding of karma. And so those stories that the teachers say about how specific things happen connected with various causes accumulated previously by specific beings, that can really help us to have a good general understanding.
So there's
many stories about various beings who became bodhisattvas, karmas that help them do that, the story of kings and their subjects and so forth, and those relationships. These are all ways of helping us to come to a clear understanding of karma, of cause and effect. But especially the middle scope section of the great treatise Lamrim, this gives a very thorough explanation of karma. So if we haven't read that, we really should.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Yes.
Good, Minoshi.
Hi, Geshe and Ngodrup. Just
Hi
had
there.
a question. I mean,
Yes.
perhaps there's no really easy answer for this, but it just strikes me that there's some people in the world who create such extreme negative karma and harm so many people on such a mass scale, and yet they're in their personal lives, they seem to flourish. It just seems so difficult to understand when we talk about the results of negative karma, when we talk about our own negative karmas, and if they're heavy, they can ripen so quickly for us. And yet we see some people in the world, I mean, we can all see them on the news. Some people engage in such extreme negative karma, harming so many people. And it's just kind of mind-blowing, how they can continue to flourish. So I don't know if there's an easy answer for this, but...
Like, is the question why they're able to continue?
Well, how can they continue? We
Yeah.
see that cause and effect, when we in our lives create a really heavy negative karma, we're told that, it can ripen even in this life so quickly.
It can. Yeah. Nanso mi mambo chi konso mi mambo nepa ke halepe duksha soya gya chambo yene konso mitse kibo chene de tubia di kare chesons. Nganso dipa jiko tsabo sana dene kewa di nangola mambo minya yores yene koronso mutu ne kibo chene dro tugidus di kare chesons sa.
Mara ta lendre ne se me ya tel o koro ti se ji yar was koro me to do ma to se ate ji na mara.
Yeah, Geshe said that like we just have to understand that karma has to have certain conditions manifest for it to ripen. That would really be the answer.
하고서 오다 걸어서 랭 엠바게 단 지금 뭐 디세트 단달래 매 아이사다 뭐 더야 마was.
In the case of those kind of beings that you're talking about, it doesn't mean that they're not going to experience the results. All it means is that the conditions haven't yet manifested for those results to ripen. That's all it means.
오다 랭 엠바 또 제가 소망 엠바 또 제가 이는 오다 디그 디세리 오가요 알았을 텐데. 레야 본 니부 메야라.
konso gonda youngest.
Sino 랭 엠바 소망 엠바 또 제가도 랭 엠바 또 제가 이나 오데 티샤왕 엠바 들 디세리 오 konso 데데도 와.
Some to rimbo mato jege. Even very heavy negative actions accumulated with a very heavy intention, that can take several lifetimes to ripen.
이나요 단다 샤왕 엠바 소데 데디 샤왕 엠바 멀페가 레 디근 디부 마르was.
Yeah, but what we need to understand in this example is that the negative things that they're engaging in and the propensity that they have to engage in those negative things, that is not the result of the previous virtues that they have accumulated. The lack of suffering that they're experiencing from those actions, that may be due to previous virtues.
But
it just, the simple answer is it sometimes just takes a while for the result of those negative actions to ripen, that's all.
Thank you very much.
Yes, yeah, you're welcome. Yeah. Like, let's look at a holy being. Let's take the example of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who continuously engages in manifold activities for the benefit of sentient beings. But his wishes and his aspirations haven't been able to fully come to fruition. They haven't ripened. Yeah. So exactly things evolving in the way that he has wished, that hasn't been able to come about. But that doesn't mean that the aspirations aren't worthy. It just means that the time for those aspirations to completely ripen has not yet manifested. So it works both ways, with heavy positivity or with heavy negativity. That's what Geshe was saying. Yeah, but this is, it is, an important and a common question that people ask, like why, if someone does something really negative, is there not an immediate result, right? But that would be the reason. Do you have a follow-up, Manoshi?
No, that's good. Thank you very much.
Is it okay? All right, okay. You do feel free to follow up at another time if you want.
Yes, thank you.
Well, we have to understand so you know about the different characteristics of karma, right, Manoshi, that karma is certain?
Yes.
You've heard that before. So that means that the result is definitely going to ripen, right? It's just a question of when. So that's really important in this context.
So as Geshe was saying that, but I guess perhaps I don't have a close relationship with some of these people, but could we purify their negative karma? Like if they were in a better state of mind, then it would be reasonable to expect that they would also create better actions and create better choices, so.
You mean like those powerful people doing the harm that you were talking about?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I don't have a direct relationship. They're not my father or mother, but you were saying that you could, to someone else who answered the question, saying we could purify their negative karma. Like,
yeah,
could I think when I'm doing my 35 confession with a practice that I'm purifying their negative karma? Like
some of it. Yeah. He said some of it, right? Not all, but some.
Not some of it. Yeah, some of it. Well, anything could help, right?
Yeah. Nanso mi halepe wangcha champo dang duksha dinso laya nganso konso digpa jangya tet so tu gires yine nganso drewa sheda mepa yine nganso koronso giche du tungchak dang doje sempa gonda sana dene pentok yorebes.
미다 걸어서 소망냐마 저와다 요와도 했더니 제나 오다 때에서 베시가 왔어.
It could possibly have an effect, maybe even just of shifting their negative state of mind.
시부터 바자 침부터니 디제 체투와쇼 자고서 여러 잘래가 책도 왔어.
And like the holy beings, they even make prayers that the lifespan of those who cause great harm and who are killing on a big level, that they have a shorter lifespan.
tene tere tanda tele tawa chimbo chil pena ngaro goja leka yoba cheba ina tela tene zipo madewa tru yugo was
Another question kind of related to what Manoshi asked, which is also a common but very important question, is a lot of times it seems that people who engage in very powerful practice, in very powerful virtue for a long time, they experience more obstacles and physical illness. Why is this the case? They're putting a lot of effort into practice and meditation, maybe doing retreat, but the result of that seems to be that they get sick, that they experience illness. How is that possible?
Yeah.
So when we look at the situation, on the surface, it baffles us, right? But what we have to understand is that the karma that is making them ill is not the karma of those spiritual activities that they're doing, right? It's another karma that happens to be ripening at that time. Yeah. So that's another question that often comes up. Yeah. So that's just one example, but there's many other sort of incongruous situations where we can, wonder how karma is functioning. We have to understand that for a specific cause, a karmic cause, to ripen into a result, it needs to have the appropriate conditions and so forth that are in place. In the absence of those conditions, it is not going to be able to ripen. And that explains why, if we think of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and many of us regard him as Avalokiteshvara, as an enlightened being, and he stated all of these aspirations, right? But those cannot really be fulfilled according to his intention, right? The workings of karma are subtle. That's what Geshe has to say on that. Shall we end here, or was there any other questions? Yeah, so Geshe said that as we go into our text, this is something I forgot. So as we go into those 4 texts, Geshe said, several of them have extensive sections on karma, right? So we will be exploring this further.
Suzette had her hand up. No, okay, that's fine.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, no. If someone, is there something or nothing? Okay. Maybe I'll just ask. Have we covered everyone's question? Is there anyone who didn't get their question in? Yeah, so Geshe said that today we had a lot of stories, but we didn't have time to say all of them. And actually, one of them I didn't understand so well. Because he thinks it was easy, but I was totally confused. But anyway, we will discuss it today, and we will definitely share it next time. My apologies for that. Geshe said, "Don't worry. It seems like we have problems, but we're just very open with each other, so it's okay. But definitely, I will make sure that I." That's Geshe said that I didn't want to. I just didn't understand at the end of the day. Yeah. So we covered a lot of the text, and in the absence of further questions, let us end here. And also, Geshe encourages you to engage with this material further, do your own studies, and as you have further questions, really please do participate in the Q&A. It's for everybody. And if you don't take away anything else from the teaching today, please take away the 2 topics, the 4 opponent powers of purification, and the 4 doors to the accumulation of faults. These are really important. And also to know, as we cultivate, for example, this practice of the confession of the 35 Buddhas, where we cultivate each of those 4 powers. So, in the absence of further questions, we'll end here. Take care, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Like, get up, my